and we could talk about this another day. I worry about them, doing what they're doing there, and them maybe not knowing what the consequences might be. But that's for another day. Just want to remind our listeners. By the way, go to stop007.org. Stop007.org. That's the new website Catherine has put up there, where she details in great detail what has happened to her over the last few years. And if you're just joining the programme, this is absolutely fascinating stuff. We're joined tonight by Dr. Catherine Horton, PhD, first class Master of Physics, and a PhD in Particle Physics from Hertford College, University of Oxford. What's been happening to her over the last few years, what Catherine claims, is absolutely terrifying. It really is. Because, Catherine, we're now going to move on in the story where this moved away from being a pantomime, this overt surveillance where they wanted you to know that they were there, but they weren't being overly intimidating. This escalated into what became more serious. Do you want to take us through that phase then?
Yes, so that actually started being a lot more worrying, well, I think after 4 months. So, I mean, it sounds incredible to people to think that this went on for 4 months, but it's true. You don't really react. You're never really sure how to react, so time just passes by. And then after a couple of months, I flew to Germany, and I joined my husband, who was working there at the time. And he and we traveled to visit my sister, and we agreed to meet my sister in the middle of a big square. And by that time, I had seen so many, dark hats and dark trench coat scenes. I was literally, in retrospect, I know it was conditioning, so I was conditioned to respond to that. And then we agreed to meet my sister in this square by text messages. And as we approached the square, suddenly in front of me, I saw a man in a dark hat, dark trench coat, just standing in the middle of the pavement. And he was at right angles to me. And as I approached, he slowly, unnaturally slowly, I should say, he turned his head towards me, stared at me, then grinned at me, and slowly turned his head back. And when someone does that to you, you instinctively follow the gaze. And when I followed it, I discovered he was staring at my sister. So he had been there ahead of us, waiting for her in the square. And we had only that morning arranged by text message to meet her exactly there. So the only people who could have known she would be there would be people who would have watched her or who would have read our text messages. So that was an instance that was not just creepy, it was horrifying. And it's one of those scenes where you discover your sister, you're just shocked. And by the time you look back, the man's gone.
So this became more than a pantomime right there in Germany. In your mind then, this is a very serious situation. So you spoke to your husband about it in Germany. What did he say, Catherine? Because if it was me, I'd be very nervous for you. I suppose I wouldn't know what to do. I'd want to call the police maybe. What was their reaction to what was going on?
So I should say that it was actually quite some time before I even told my husband, because at the time I thought, oh, this is just going to pass. And even when that scene happened, I thought, am I really sure? Did this really happen? It's just so fleeting, and the entire system is designed to be exactly that, so that you don't really, you can't really grip onto anything. And so in the beginning, I didn't even tell my husband. For example, in that scene, I thought, oh, if I told him, he would think I'm crazy. He would think I'm just being silly. So I didn't even tell him at the time. It really was, I think, only after a year and a half that I even told him. It was only once this harassment had followed us to Germany. And by the time I told my husband, he couldn't really believe it. He couldn't believe that there would be a system quite so organized who would be just harassing me. That's the misunderstanding. People always say, oh, but why would they do it just to you? And then you discover that actually it's not just being done to you, it's being done to many, many people across the country.
It didn't, unfortunately for you, it didn't stop at very creepy intimidation, smiling at you on the street, looking at your sister, knowing your movements. It escalated into more serious what you call in your videos and on your website crimes. Talk about when it escalated into, eventually this escalated into assault, didn't it?
That's right, into actual physical assault. Yes, and not just physical assault, into non-stop physical assault. So it's very, very hard to understand. So I can explain how it unfolded, and then maybe afterwards I can explain how, as a systems analyst, I can actually explain that it's not just not surprising, it's what you would expect. So what happened is that we, at the end of 2012, so after about a year of stalking, I moved to Germany. And I should say that what happened whilst I was still in Oxford is that I had a break-in into my home. And nothing was stolen, nothing of value was taken. But I came home one day and I found that someone had just rearranged my cupboard. And again, it's something that you can't really go to the police with. You can't say, officer, someone came in and rearranged my cupboard. Yeah. So I didn't say anything at the time. It was very shocking, but I thought, oh, well, college flats, everybody has the keys and we've got janitors, so someone must have come in and had a joke on something. So, but then I moved to Germany at the end of my fellowship. And then what happened is that these odd scenes started up again. We had crazy stuff like a ginormous bus seat placed next to our car in the middle of a forest. So we would come back from a walk and find a huge bus seat in the mud with a note saying in broken German that I should step on and wipe my feet on it. And really disconcerting, unusual, and very rare scenes. And they would keep happening nonstop. But then after a while, we moved to Munich. And in Munich, this escalated. So again, I had men waiting outside my home almost daily. They would be there if I left the home on my own and not be there if my husband came with me. And after a while, I discovered that they must be surveying the inside of my home because they were there as soon as I reached the bottom of the stairs, in a sense.
Did you think about taking any photographs of these people and showing them to your husband or to the police or anybody?
Yes, I did. So I tried to photograph them. I tried to actually capture them. And the problem was that it was always a different person. And then it's the courts and the police are geared towards recognizing stalking if it's, sexual stalking by one person who was obsessed with you. If I had gone to the police with that, they would have kicked into action straight away, I think. But when it's a group of people, they don't know where to place it because the question is always, why would anybody do such a thing? And but I think what it was at the time, it wasn't just a random group. This was the National Surveillance Network, which I've now realized exists and is actually quite large. But then the stalking wasn't just the only thing. In Munich, these disconcerting scenes also followed me into the waiting room of doctors' surgeries. In the end, doctors themselves would be behaving very oddly. So I had one doctor who spent literally 15 minutes ask me about my past history and go into great detail about my nationality. And
no way.
Yeah, it was, but really disconcerting. And what was especially disconcerting is that he had a huge grin on his face whilst he did that.
Now, did you, listen, don't be insulted by this. This is a natural question. Did you at any stage begin to doubt your own sanity? Did you start to think, I might need a rest here. I might be overworked or stressed because why is this going on? Did you ever doubt yourself, Catherine?
Well, in the beginning, I really doubted if this is actually happening. I just thought, oh, this is just coincidence. And for example, if someone stands outside your home, you would think, oh, maybe he's just smoking a cigarette. Maybe this guy just waits for somebody. And oh, maybe that guy, just dropped off his car. So you find different excuses over and over. But eventually it turned into systematic harassment, where they made sure that I noticed. So it would not just be a man standing outside my drive. He would be standing there grinning and then set off when I set off, just like in Oxford.
And these are presumably German intelligence agents or German spooks or whatever, obviously operating with the intelligence agencies of the UK. Now, some of our listeners, again, they'll be wondering, why didn't these guys just make it clear what they wanted from you? Why didn't they, if they wanted to frighten you off, if they thought you were involved in something, whether you were or were not, why did they play these games? Now, I know this is a question that you've asked yourself, I suppose, 1,000 times, but just putting those questions to you. I mean, at some stage you must have felt like screaming, what's going on here? Why are you guys doing this? What is it you want from me, basically?
Exactly this. What on earth is it that you want from me is the question that you ask yourself all the way, and you just never get an answer. And to this day, I didn't get an answer asking that question. Eventually, what I had to do is go back and think as a physicist and think as a systems analyst and think, hang on, what if? I mean, it clearly doesn't make any sense. I was never involved in any criminal activity. I'm not a spy. I never have been. What I'm actually doing is most of the time very academic. And what I was doing in Germany is actually trying to launch a startup, helping people get back into work. So, and everything I did was public. So why would somebody do something like that? And I think I now came to realize that's the wrong question to ask, because you're not dealing with a normal system. You're dealing with a system that has run out of control. And to explain it maybe to you and your listeners, there's an example from Germany where I think what happened is that the job center was so inundated with work they couldn't keep up, and they amassed a ginormous backlog. And eventually people put huge pressure on the people working in the job center, and they had to meet targets. And what these people did just to survive and keep their jobs is they started shredding files. Literally, they just shredded them and claimed that these people never turned up to claim benefits. And then imagine if you're a benefit claimant and you go into this system, which is internally run out of control, and you submit a claim and then they don't get back to you. At first you think it's personal, and you think, why are they doing it to me? You know, what have I done to them that they would do something like that to me? And in the end, this entire scandal was uncovered and so on. But it's the wrong question to ask. It's not personal. It's not personal to me. And I now know that there are thousands of people in my situation.
Now, before we get to that, give us an example of when it got physical. When did it first turn physical, and what happened?
Well, the very first time it turned physical, I didn't even notice. Because what started happening, now in hindsight, I will just label it as such, is essentially, I would say, weapons testing or even human experimentation. Because the very first thing that was extremely odd is I started having a heart problem. And I started having intense heart pains, and it just continued over weeks. And I'm a very healthy, fit person. And eventually I went to the doctor, had blood samples taken, and the heart pain disappeared as soon as I went. And it was just gone. And I realized, and in retrospect, I realized that that was actually induced. And the entire goal of it was to actually get hold of a blood sample.
Now, your doctor, she or he, they gave you a clean bill of health. So you went with the heart pain, the palpitations or whatever. They took blood tests and probably did an ECG probably or whatever, and said nothing wrong with your heart, right?
Absolutely.
But he had a blood sample. Now, when did you begin to suspect that? Because you had these problems again, and we talked about these today. These feelings of intense pressure, of pain. At some stage, you start to wonder: am I being attacked by something? Am I being attacked by some weapon that is unseen, that I can't see, or that I don't know anything about? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the very first time I was actually overtly attacked was from a helicopter. And that was the very, very first time I actually came across this new type of weapon. And again, I was so used to harassment and strange scenes by that time that, it just passed me by. Other people, I think, would flip out straight away. And by that time, you're so worn down, you just think, oh, that's just, yet another item of harassment.